So I'm joined here by Jared Morris. Jared is the founder and CEO of Fleet EV and Plug Charging. Jared, thanks for coming on.
Great to be here.
So Jared, take us back to the early days. What did Fleet EV look like when you started here in the co-working space?
So I started Fleet TV back in 2021. So prior to that, I was working out my lounge in Cardiff Bay, which probably wasn't an ideal setup to try to scale a business. Then took up space in the co-working space at the Maltons. So I was actually based in the Maltons back in 2013. I worked for a company based here, so I was familiar with the building. Saw the opportunity to tap into an office co-working space here. Came here and set up, provided us a really good opportunity to have decent office space, good facilities, gym and everything on site as well, which is really important for us as we grew the company, which we knew we would. We wanted to have somewhere where employees actually enjoyed coming to work and it wasn't just another office. So yeah, it worked really well for us, and then obviously grew with the business. As we grew the business, the office space grew with us. The support grew with us as well. I think that's been a big thing for us. In fact, staying here has probably been the biggest driver for us, is the support we get from everyone here, whether that's other businesses that were in the co-working space, for example, when we started off, or the reception team, Sophia's office manager, yourself as well, and everyone else involved in the Maltons has been really supportive of us as we've grown.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks, Jared. I suppose on that, to come in at the co-working space, which was the co-working space, and obviously then rent it with the amount of staff that you had at the time, what was that like as well?
Well, I think we probably moved the most number of times of all tenants in the Maltons. I think 7 times we moved in total. So our journey here is a co-working space. Then we went to a 2-person internal office. So decided we wanted somewhere which is actually private space for us. We could do calls, etc. Went to that 2-person internal office with no windows, and then decided we needed to bring more people on. So took an external office, then just started knocking walls on left, right, and centre to build that office out. And then got to a point where actually we said, we need more space again. You probably got fed up of me ringing you all the time asking for more space. Ended up going back to the co-working space. This co-working space became available, and then it just seemed like a no-brainer for us to take that forward. So we moved into there in April last year, which was kind of a full circle moment for us, going from obviously starting in there to going back to actually running a full team of 15 members of staff in there.
Yep.
Then progress and fast forward to October. Again, we've grown the company again. So there's 27 people now across both companies. Decided we needed more space, needed more collaboration, needed more space for meetings, etc. So again, picking up the phone to you and ringing you and asking you for what opportunity there was for space there. So I think you guys have been really accommodating with that and grown with us. But also helps us to transition from office to office. Good thing for us, obviously, staying in the same location, so people haven't got to change where they're travelling to. We haven't got to change where we're registered, etc. But the flexibility on that has been key for us. But it was a big full circle moment for us going back to the co-working space after being there back in 2021.
And I guess just leaping back again, Jared, you set Fleet EV up. What was the idea there? I suppose it's a great industry now when you look back at it. I mean, you had the vision, and it's great to see how well you've done with it. But why was it, what was it about Fleet EV that you saw at the time?
So I think one of the big things I've seen in my experience in finance and automotive is, as soon as electric vehicles start getting introduced, no one really knew how to make that switch. So lots of people I was speaking to wanted to go EV but didn't know the impact of going EV, whether that was the operational impact of going that, how often people got to charge their vehicles, how much downtime we're going to have, etc., the maintenance costs, financing costs, and everything in between. So the purpose of Fleet EV was to try and demystify the minefield of going electric and provide people a pathway to decarbonising their fleets. We probably started it in the worst time to start an electric vehicle company, because you couldn't actually get electric vehicles because there's a semiconductor shortage. So early 2021, off the back of COVID, you couldn't actually get any electric vehicles delivered. So it took a bit of a leap of faith, really, in saying that it's all going to end up okay in the end, and a bit of a gut feeling on it. The aim was to keep it really consultative and really small. That went out the window as soon as we started getting some traction with it. So we started with myself and then brought on Matt, who's now our head of sales. So he's employee number 1, as we call him. And he's kind of grown with the company as we've got to where we are now, which across Fleet EV and Plug, which is the infrastructure arm we started in 2023, we've got 27 members of staff across both of them. But I think all of that has been underpinned by keeping that consultative approach, trying to scale it as efficiently as possible, but also trying to provide a solution for people that want to make that switch, whether that's looking at the EV fleet, looking at specialist vehicles, looking at salary sacrifice, or even just looking at the infrastructure part of it as well.
Yeah. So running a business has its ups and downs. What were the biggest challenges that you faced where, at any point in the business, I suppose?
I think probably the biggest one we started out was credibility. A fairly new company in a fairly difficult space, going into big organisations, big public sector organisations, asking to trust us on quite a big leap of faith. And I think that was probably the big thing for us. And the second part was we were building a lot of it from scratch as well. So my ethos for the company was, go for contracts, look at opportunities, look at what they needed to establish in terms of the processes. And if we were to win them, then we'd build a lot of that. In the early days, it kind of has to be like that, I feel, when you've got a startup. Yeah. And we were bringing on staff and trying to slot them into places where we thought the gaps were. You end up with then staff covering other areas of the business. So you might take on someone in operations, for example. They end up doing some stuff with sales, covering some of the tech stuff as well. I think that's a necessary evil, but I think we've done quite well in that space in terms of building it on the way up and then delivering really well at the start and continuing to deliver well just enhances that credibility. I think one of the things for us, particularly being based here, for example, I think we mentioned it for the podcast earlier. Being in the co-working space, people see a nice office in the background as well. Yeah. And they realise you're not just someone starting this from your bedroom, which I was at the start. And I think that was a big step change for us as well in terms of having that professional corporate feel to it. And I think that's something we've taken through with everything we've done here as well. To the office we're in now, that's a lot more corporate, a lot more structured. But we've also got the fun of having darts there, for example. We've got the kind of the startup feel whilst trying to balance the corporate aspect of it as well.
Yeah, there is always a buzz when we come in the office, and we're happy clients as well with obviously our business and stuff, and you guys have been great with that. So I can vouch for that fully. I suppose just while we're on there as well, with plug charging, obviously they work arm in arm, right? Yeah. But what gave you that idea as well? Was that something that was always going to happen, or was it something that just fell into place?
It's kind of accident, which I think is often the case with some of these businesses that sprout out of other businesses. We were getting lots of people asking about charge infrastructure. Yeah. At the time, we were just basically introducing that to an electrician. They'd go and do the charger installs. We saw the opportunity with that. Well, actually, some of the objections we're getting from people is around infrastructure. So if we can offer infrastructure as well, we can handle that objection and obviously provide them a full end-to-end solution. I think that's now really grown arms and legs. So the business is set with two separate limited companies, but do work very closely together. So we offer like depot-based charging, for example, if people have got fleets. So we obviously install all their chargers at their depots. So we do that for various local authorities across UK and Ireland, lots of that in Wales. We've then got workplace charging, where we've got the chargers here in the car park, for example, so offering a good resource for people to use chargers when they're in work all day. We've just got chargers going into Cardiff Council lampposts, where we're putting chargers into the side of lampposts to offer people on-street charging as well. So that's kind of grown arms and legs, but based on the way that the industry has grown as well, looking for the big pain points people have in terms of where they can charge their vehicles. They're taking their vehicles home at night. Can they charge them at home? If they don't have a driveway, they're going to struggle. Yeah. If they sat in an office for 8 hours a day, it's a good opportunity for them to charge their vehicles as well. So it's almost come off the back of the information and the knowledge we've learned through Fleet has created the opportunity for that as well. Yeah. And look, we've tried lots of different things with that as well. We've tried a mobile charger that didn't work, so we canned that. Yeah. So I think in the early days, we try a lot. And then we doubled down on what would work. And now we're channeling all our resources to that. And I think that's shown. Like, we've acquired 3 companies in the last 6 months. We've got another 5 on the go at the moment. The team is growing all the time. We've got 3 new people starting next month. We've got probably another 2 or 3 starting in May. So all the time we're adding headcount and cost and all that goes with it. But the revenue aspect of that is growing exponentially as well.
It's great. No, it's great to see, Jared. And I suppose just on that, what advice do we need to... I mean, I made the switch 2 years ago. Best thing I've done. Obviously, with everything going on in the world at the minute, sort of, do you see it, is there going to be an increase in terms of people making that switch that haven't already?
I think so, yeah. I think obviously price of fuel is good and bad. So price of fuel increase is obviously driving people to go to EV, but it is also driving people to look at alternative sources for energy. Yeah. So if people that have predominantly used a fossil fuel tariff on their home, for example, previously, and now been switching to a REGO-backed tariff, which is green energy, and the same in the public sector, that is pushing the prices up with that as well. So we've kind of got 2 things going side by side here. We've got people going EV, but also the price of electricity is increasing because of the energy crisis, as they're now calling it. So I think people are going to switch more to EV, and we are seeing a big upturn in inquiries over the last couple of weeks, particularly on things like salary sacrifice schemes, where we've got that in place for the Maltons based to be here and the associated companies. I think that's a real good quick win because they can save between 30 to 40%, sometimes up to 60%, depending on your tax bracket, on the price of an EV, plus the fuel savings. And also with the growth of people having like solar, battery on their houses as well, technically you've got your own little fuel station. If you've got a driveway, put solar on your roof, put a charger outside, you won't have to worry then about looking in Cardiff where the fuel stations are empty. You can just charge up at home every night. So yeah, it is creating some benefits for us, but also creating some challenges on supply chain, in particular, because obviously vehicles come from China, now affected by shipping crisis and whatnot. So yeah, there's lots of good stuff, but also some challenges that come with that.
Swings and roundabouts, yeah. I guess on that as well, like a lot of people that haven't made that switch, you know, they might say, I live in a terraced house in Roath, for example, or where do you see the future of that going? I know you looked at lampposts, I saw online, things like that. How are we going to solve that issue that people are worrying about?
I think it's quite a big misconception about how often you actually need to charge electric vehicles. I think you could probably vouch for that in driving an EV yourself. You know, you don't need to charge an electric vehicle every day, and it doesn't need to be charged 100% all the time.
Yeah.
You know, there's the opportunity to charge on lamppost, which is a new one that we're installing. There's other chargers going in Cardiff as well on street. But also, if your workplace has chargers or there's a charging hub near you, you might need to charge once or twice a week, unless you're doing big miles. So you know, the infrastructure people say is still a problem, but now the number of chargers outweighs the number of fuel pumps in the UK. And you can't put a fuel pump at home. So if you do have off-road parking, great. If you don't have off-road parking, there are some compromises around that can be put in place with things like lamp column chargers. If you look at London, for example, you know, every street you go into London has maybe 5-6 chargers on it. I think that's where it's going to get to, is that people need to realise that there will be chargers on their streets in the next 5-10 years. But also they need to appreciate that working with public sector organisations, there's lots of people to approve things, there's stakeholders involved in that, and it's slower. All I'd say is that people need to have faith that the infrastructure is improving, but also just be realistic about how many times you might need to charge that vehicle on a weekly basis, and whether you can charge it in places like this if you have an office here, or maybe in hubs as well.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Very good point. I suppose when you look at the journey, Jared, like you started off in that co-working, and now you're one of our biggest clients here at the Maltins. What would you say the highs have been from Fleet EV?
I think every office move for us has been stressful, in the sense, obviously, it's like moving house, isn't it? But I think each one of those is a moment to step back and look at the growth aspect of it. And, you know, I sometimes walk on this floor up here, on the third floor, we were originally based just below this. You know, when we walk past the office, which we used to be in, and look at where we are now, you know, we had literally just one desk in there, and I was sat probably 5 inches away from a mat every single day. You know, we're now in an office where we've got 35 desks, and we've got teams, we've got sales team, operations team, finance team, engineering team, all working on their own respective parts of the business. And I think that's quite a proud moment for me to see everyone just get on with it and pushing, I think, to improve and make the business better. And I think as well, you know, I think the credibility and trust part I mentioned at the start as well, I think that's really grown for us. And I think that's evidenced in the fact that obviously we do lots of vehicles for Resource and all the associated companies. You know, and I feel like the family vibe here, which is quite useful for us and is probably the biggest benefit for us, has just reinforced that credibility that we do lots of businesses in the Maltins, like we do stuff with Suplayo, for example, who ironically were in the co-working space at the same time as us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of grown from Suplayo being in the co-working space at the same time as us to us now supplying their salary sacrifice vehicles. Obviously we do the vehicles for the Resource companies as well. But there's no shortage of opportunity here to cross-pollinate with other businesses. You know, on the plug side of the business, for example, we use Hero Architecture for our planning advice and local development advice. You know, that was an easy win for me. As soon as we got asked for the opportunity to price that into a job, first thing I did was look out my window, and Hero literally 6 meters away from me. So the first thing I did was then pick up the phone to Carl, who I know, and just say, look, you know, can we work with you guys on this? Yeah, I'll pop down in an hour. So you know, it's a good little ecosystem here. That's created the opportunity for us to work with people. And I think that's been the high of working here compared to other experiences I've had in other offices and whatnot, is the people are willing to help you. And you just got to walk through Kinnock, which we do every day now, where our office is. And sometimes it takes me 10 minutes to walk through there because you get pulled into conversations and you know, people want to grab you for coffee and whatnot. But that's good. It creates a collaborative environment where everyone's working towards the same goal and everyone's trying to do the best and grow their businesses.
So just finally as well, you've made some great points there. I guess if someone came with an idea, started up in the co-working space, what advice would you give them from your experience, I suppose?
I think use the resources around you is a big thing. You know, even if you're in the co-working space, you're not actually renting an office here. You know, there's still opportunities to collaborate with people. There's still opportunities to ask advice. You know, we didn't know everything at the start. We still didn't know everything. But there's so many businesses here that you can tap into and ask advice to. But also use that space. You know, when we were in the co-working space, for example, we dealt with Suplayo. We also dealt with other people there as well. I still see them around the place. Some people are still in the co-working space, and that's fine. You know, that's where they work from, and they're still collaborating people in there. So don't be afraid to collaborate and use the resource around you. And I think just an overarching piece as well, advice that I've got given was around the resilience piece as well. You know, when you start in that business and you go into the co-working space, you're always looking, oh, that person's got a big office. I did it. You know, I was in the co-working space and looking at the big offices here, thinking, you know, I want to be in that big office, and I knew we'd kind of get there one day. And then you have a bit of FOMO that you're not in the office at that point. But it's a case of, if you believe in what you do and you trust the process, resilience compounds more than anything. People are constantly chasing the quick wins and want to get stuff moving as quickly as possible. But if you just keep repeating those little things every single day, the boring things, as people call them, that resilience compounds. And, the knockbacks compound as well, in a good way, that when you actually then start building your business, you actually know what you're doing with it. And you end up in a situation where you're like us then, where you go from the co-working space, you go to another office, you end up going back to co-working space as a tenant, and you're able to grow with it as well. So my overarching advice is use the resources around you, especially in places like co-working space. Given the nature of the name, co-working, you should be collaborating with people in there, having conversations. We had it the other day where we were chatting to Lloyd, for example, who's in the co-working space when we started in there, about translation services. So that's something that we now operate in UK and Ireland. Obviously we're in Wales as well, so we do everything bilingually. We do things in Gaelic in Ireland as well. And I reached out to Lloyd on the translation stuff, saying we need to translate our website and app. Is that something you can support with? I wouldn't have known Lloyd if it wasn't in the co-working space. So there's potentially 6, 8, 10 businesses in any one time, for example, that might be working at the same time as you. Sometimes you're grabbing a coffee and you're still with the county, you have that conversation, you end up then circling back on that 5, 6 years later. So just be open to conversation and be willing to help people around you and vice versa as well.
Thanks, Jared. It's amazing to see what you've built over the past few years here, and you are just, you're one of our, well, I can't really have favourites, but you are one of the best members we've got here. And no, it's great to see you grow your business, and I wish you all the best.
No, thank you for the support, appreciate it.